All right. It looks like it's 2 p.m. Eastern time, so I will go ahead and welcome to everyone's meeting today, or everyone to today's meeting, excuse me. We are excited to have you joining us as we offer our first session that is really targeted to trainees in our 16 funded labs and other research labs across the country. Today's session is part of an ongoing webinar series, so we hope that if you have a great experience that you join us for future webinars. Please do keep in mind that as we go through the webinar, we are happy to accept questions. You can drop those in the Q&A box at any time, but we will hold those and share them with our presenter after she concludes her formal presentation. You'll also notice that today's session is being recorded. Give us 2 or 3 business days to process the recording and get that uploaded to our YouTube channel, but we will make that available to you following the live session. So today's presenter is Dr. Brittany Rice. Dr. Rice is part of the Markey Cancer Center here at the University of Kentucky and is a co-director for the Strong Scholars Program. She's going to be speaking to us today about scientific communication and specifically looking at the intersection between literature and presentations. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Brittany Rice, and today I am going to be talking about the intersection between scientific literature and presentation. So we're really focusing on scientific communication. But before I begin, I want to briefly introduce myself to each of you. I'm currently a program co-director for 2 cancer education and research training programs at the University of Kentucky Markey Cancer Center. And my appointment as a program director initially began during my postdoctoral fellowship, where I developed evaluative measures to assess the effectiveness of current and future cancer education programs. My current research interests include learning more about the factors that influence the persistence and the lack thereof of underrepresented and/or underserved students in science. And this is a result of my aspiration to continue to develop and oversee post-secondary science education interventions for students. So in other words, I have a goal of becoming a faculty member that continues to direct science education and research training programs. Despite my current development as a behavioral scientist, I'm a lab rat at heart, meaning I have spent a substantial amount of time at the bench. I obtained my doctorate degree in nutritional sciences from the University of Kentucky in December of 2021. And my dissertation research used animal models to understand the influence of early life environmental exposures on later life obesity and diabetes health outcomes. Prior to that, I conducted research as an undergraduate and also as a post-baccalaureate scholar. Okay, so now that we are better acquainted, I would like to inform you of the competencies that you will walk away with upon the completion of this talk. So shown are the learning objectives for our time together today. We will spend a short amount of time on learning objective 1, and the remainder and the predominance of my talk will be on the 2nd and the 3rd learning objectives. I'm going to begin by providing you basic information on the 4 different types of scientific papers. Of those, we will concentrate on original articles. I will then discuss in detail the best and worst practices for oral and poster presentations, and then I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So, scientific literature is a body of publications that contains reports of research and is often reviewed by experts. These papers are written by scholars and are for scholars or other experts. So you're not going to see these articles in People magazine, nor will you see them in Oprah magazine. Instead, they are going to be published in science, health, and medical journals. Clinical papers describe patients. 2 types of clinical papers include case studies and clinical trial papers. Clinical case studies will describe the patient's symptoms, diagnoses, and treatment of the disease and the disorder at hand. Clinical trial papers are going to describe the methods and the results of controlled studies that are usually undertaken with a large amount of patients that have been randomly assigned to a treatment group or a control group. Original articles report original research as its name suggests, meaning that the researchers conducting the research or the study, describe the study, including their hypothesis, their research questioning, amongst many other things. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this type of scientific paper later. Now, review articles provide comprehensive overviews of a specific type, of a specific topic or a field. And this includes summarizations of clinical case studies, clinical trial reports, and other original articles as they pertain to the topic of discussion. Please note that unlike original articles, review articles discuss other researchers' work, and thereby this type of article is considered secondary. Perspective articles are where experts in the field are going to give their opinion on some topic or aspect of research. So let's circle back to original articles really quick. Now recall, I said that these are the articles where researchers are going to describe their studies that they conduct. I also want to mention that there is a specific type of original article called letters. And this type conveys a short story or an observation that invites a follow-up. It can consist of 1 or 2 figures and has a specific requirement per the journal that it is submitted to. In general, the basic structure of an original article consists of an introduction, a method, results, and discussion. Please keep in mind that this basic structure is also used for the designing of scientific presentations. Because most of you all are conducting research in a lab and generating data, I'm strongly encouraging you all to speak with your PIs, principal investigators, or your lab head and ask them to be included in the drafting of manuscripts. Such may allow for authorship, which in turn will increase your competitiveness for further education and career opportunities. Now, for the introduction, authors grab the attention of their audience by providing an overview of their field. This overview starts off very, very broad, and then it begins to narrow to establish the research problem. Towards the end of the introduction section, your objectives and hypotheses will be stated. I want to note that not all original research has a hypothesis, as some studies are conducted a priori or are exploratory. The methods section tells us what techniques were used to perform the experiment and how the techniques were performed. By providing this information, it's going to give us the rationale for our experimental design. Also, the statistical approach used to analyze the data collected from the experiments are also described here within. The results section details the data, and it can do so in a variety of different ways, which include, but are not limited to, graphs and tables. Also, results describe the data obtained, but does not interpret the findings. During the discussion section, an author describes, analyzes, and interprets their findings. Additionally, their work in context to what is known within the literature is also reported. Moreover, a discussion section is used to discuss the weaknesses or limitations of their research and to discuss what future experiments should be conducted to continue this work. Okay, so based on the material that we just covered, you should be able to define the 4 types of scientific papers, which are clinical, original, review, and perspective, as well as define the components of an original research article, which include the introduction, the methods, the results, and the discussion. Now we're going to transition into discussing scientific presentations. In general, speakers give presentations with 1 or 2 things in mind, those being to inform their audience and or to persuade their audience. Regardless of the intent, presentations provide the audience with info. Now, the information provided to the audience in a presentation should be in a story format, meaning you need an introduction or a beginning, a middle, and an end. Shown is the Golden Gate Bridge. This picture is a great example of how a presentation story should be set up, as the bridge has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Before diving into each section, I want you to take a look at the photo and note that the introduction and the end are less in size compared to the middle. This is because they are the supports for your story and because the meat is in the middle. Keep that in mind. Now, the introduction should set the scene and introduce the main characters. You can ask yourself when compiling or generating your introduction section, what is the necessary background information about your research topic that the audience must know? How did this lead your research? How did this lead you to your research question? What were you hoping to find out? Who are the main characters? Like, what's the disease, the drug, the cell type, the region of the body or the brain, or the technique that you're going to be describing? And what are the relevant parts of their characteristics to the story? Now, the middle section is the adventure or the data, and it answers the following questions. How did you get from your research question to your conclusion? Why did you choose to take that route? And what did you find along your way? Were there any interesting twists to your research? Now, the final section, which is the conclusion to your story, should answer the following questions. What is the ultimate consequence of your journey? What does this mean for your characters? And is this really the end of your adventure, or are there plenty more adventures to come? There are always future directions in science, so you'll never have a story that just ends without being like the prequel to something else. And you also want to say, or ask yourself, or answer, what might these future directions look like? Now, remember, you are the narrator, so it's up to you as a storyteller to make the content both compelling and exciting. The attendees of your talk are going to have a mixture of backgrounds, so some are going to be experts and others won't, but your talk and your story should speak to the entire audience. So please keep that in mind. Now, in science, there are two types of presentations, these being oral presentations and poster presentations. There are many commonalities and many differences with these types of presentations. The differences include the number of slides utilized to deliver the talk and the manner in which the talk is given. When generating presentations, it's important to consider the level of conformity and the format for the talks. Oral presentations are going to be really, really rigid as they entail of multiple slides that progress in a linear format, meaning you have your background information that is shared, then it's followed by your explanation of your results and your methods, and then it's going to be concluded with the discussion. Poster presentations, on the other hand, are more flexible and they consist of one slide containing multiple points of information. Although a poster will have an introduction section, a method section, a results section, and also a discussion, all of these components will be shown at once. So it's a nonlinear format, and they can be discussed in a sequence manner or not. Another thing that I want to point out is that typically at conferences, you are only going to give an oral presentation once, but poster presentations are often repeated multiple times in one session, and they can vary in the length and the way that you deliver them. Now that we've covered the distinct elements of oral and poster presentations, I want to provide you all with some good and bad case point examples to describe the distinctions of both types of presentations. I'm now going to show you some background and data slides from oral presentations. There's going to be a few animations, so just bear with me. Okay, so in this slide, the speaker is wishing to provide background information on polychlorinated biphenyls. For starters, we see that there is too much text, varying font sizes, and that the speaker did not keep this slide simple. That should be the goal of your talks when you're generating them, to keep them simple. You don't want to put large blocks of text in it. Instead, you want to use larger and legible font that is at least 24 points or more. Bullets also are helpful. You want to emphasize your main points on your slide. Now, next we see that the color choices in this slide are not the most sensible. So you want to avoid loud and garish colors. Dark text on a light background is best. Also, you want to avoid colorblind combinations, those being red and green and blue and yellow. While the presenter did do the right thing by providing a slide credit down here, it's important to note that this really isn't legible with the background color on the slide. Now, the pictures on this slide are a bit overwhelming. So when you use pictures, I want you to do just that. Use them and don't let them use you. Too many pictures diverts the audience attention away from the content and makes the presentation more difficult. Also, this slide is an example of animation personified. Again, keep it simple. If you use animation, apply one slide transition style to all of your slides and one animation scheme to all of your slides. When you change in between the styles, that makes the presentation look ununified. Further, busy presentations, they divert the audience attention. Okay, so this is a better example of how to depict the background information of polychlorinated biphenyls. This slide properly utilizes appropriate colored, sized, and font text to communicate main ideas, which are bulleted and not in block style text. Further, the graphic included enhances the content displayed and the slide is not distracting. Now, based upon the two examples that I just showed you, you want to make sure that as best as you can, you illustrate one message per slide. Several prompts can be in your slide and help to make this message. Slide titles, such as shown here, are perfect places to spell out verbatim your message. So use them, use them, use them. And remember, as a speaker, you are delivering the presentation. Please don't just read off the slides. Use your slides as props to support and enhance your talk. Appropriate use of contrast and visuals will help enhance the story, which is your introduction, remember your middle and the end. Now, with that being said, we're going to move on to how one would visually depict results during an oral presentation. I'm going to give you a minute to read this. Okay, I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds. This is like a super fast minute. Okay, so what the creator of this slide did well was properly, utilize the white space. So we don't have too much of it that's not being used. This is good. Now, if the presenter covering this talk were just to pull this slide up and say PCB gestation exposure causes a significant reduction in the body weight of offspring born to het dams, and offspring that were born to knockout dams exhibit no difference while showing you this slide, they wouldn't necessarily be reporting the results the wrong way. In fact, they are reporting the results, but this isn't the best method. So you want to be sure that you walk your audience through your data. A better way to initially start the discussion on this slide is to say that display is the body weight data for the 2-month-old offspring. I am going to orient you with these graphs to help you better follow the graphs to come. Offspring of the het dams will always be on the left side of each slide. Offspring of the knockout dams data will always be on the right side of each slide. Data from vehicle exposed offspring will always be on the left side of each graph, and data from PCB exposed offspring will always be on the right side of the graph. Offspring genotype can be shown or seen, on the x-axis, and I want you all to remember that this figure depicts the body weight of offspring born to NRF2 heterozygous or knockout dams. The blue bars on the graph are indicative of male offspring, while the females are displayed within pink. So now that the presenter has oriented the audience with the graph, he, she, or they can now say what we see is that PCB gestation exposure causes a significant reduction in the body weight of offspring born to het dams. while offspring born to knockout dams exhibit no difference in the body weight. Offspring genotype, respective to treatment, does not influence offspring body weight. I also have to take the time, and I would be remiss if I did not point out that the main message of the slide is found within the slide title here. Remember, I want you all to utilize these. So there is so much more to an oral presentation other than just slide design and walking your audience through your data. Some tips to improve your oral presentation skills include what are shown. I want you to start off by emphasizing that your initial discussion about your oral presentation should begin with your PI. Because like you, they know your topic and research well. I want you to start off by outlining what you think should be included in your presentation. And then I want you to share it with your PI. You should also tailor your presentation to your audience. So you've got to consider their needs, their interests, their knowledge level, etc. Remember that the agenda at most conferences are full. So about 8 or 9 out of 10 times a person that attends your talk is there because they want to be there and they are extremely interested in your topic. It's important to understand the expectations of your audience and adjust the content to be delivered accordingly. This is going to ensure maximum engagement. Next, I would like to emphasize the importance of organizing your talk. It should be clear and concise and consist of an introduction, your main points with supporting evidence, which is also known as your data, and then a conclusion. About 20% of your presentation talk time should be spent on your introduction. A proper introduction to your topic is going to ensure that the audience can stay with you throughout the entirety of the presentation. Also, you want to ensure smooth transitions between sections because you want to maintain an optimal flow. Now, our visuals are very important because they can enhance the understanding and the retention of the content delivered when they're properly utilized. So when I was walking you through the graphs a few slides ago, I was sure to include visual cues that were helpful and that were not overwhelming when explaining the axes as well as other portions of the graphs. I also need you all to practice your presentation multiple times so that you can become familiar with the content and the delivery. I'm going to say that 2 more times because it's so important. I want you all to be sure that you practice your presentations multiple times to become familiar with the content and the delivery. This is my last time because it's important. Please practice your presentations multiple times to ensure that you are familiar with the content and its delivery. You want to make sure that you adhere to the time imposed upon an oral presentation. So let's say if you were told to prepare a 15-minute talk, I want you to go ahead and allot 10 minutes for talking and 5 minutes I want you to allot for questions and answers. If you are told to prepare a 30-minute talk, allot about 20 to 25 minutes for talking and then about 10 to 5 minutes for Q&A and so on. Now, my initial recommendation, which is shown here, to consult your PI is an ongoing one throughout the entire preparation of your oral presentation. You're going to practice your talk with them several times. And then last but not least, when you're delivering your talk, you've got to maintain eye contact with your audience. And I want you to use positive body language to create a connection. Gestures, facial expressions, and tone inflection should convey confidence and enthusiasm to your audience because this is ultimately going to enhance the impact of your message. A quick note about enthusiasm is not everyone is extroverted. So enthusiasm expressed differs from person to person. Passion is also expressed uniquely. So when you're giving your talk, I want you to showcase your enthusiasm and the passion about your work in a way that feels most true to you. Remember that your audience may think, hey, if presenter so-and-so isn't really passionate about something, why should I be? All right. So again, I mentioned that there were 2 types of presentations. We just covered the oral. Now we're going to jump into the posters. I want you to remember that with the oral presentations, they're rigid, they're in a linear delivery format. You also are going to give a lot of information about your topic, and it's likely going to be timed. Poster presentations, on the other hand, are very flexible. They may not be delivered in a sequential manner. You're going to give an overview, and you might, or most likely you will, repeat your presentation to different people or attendees in a multitude of different ways. So I'm going to give you all a little bit of time to just look at this poster, maybe about 30 seconds. Okay, so this poster is really, really great, and it has a lot of information on it. But one thing I want to point out is that you have to tell a story. And just by looking at this poster, while it has a lot of great data, it's very, very busy. There are so many figures. I see figures within the introduction, figures within what our results are, and it could kind of be hard to know what I should focus on. Additionally, I would like to say what I do like about this poster is that it has figure captions that are very, very clear. So just in case, let's say the presenter stepped off to use the restroom or something of that sort, I wouldn't necessarily need them here to understand what is going on, or to have an idea, excuse me, I should say, as to what is going on. So remember, a good poster, it's got a title, it's got the author block, it's got the institution, it has our different sections, but it's just very, very busy. So when you're telling your story, you want to make sure that you select the data that are most appropriate to enhancing the overall message or idea of whatever your talk is on. So that's likely going to be your main findings. Okay, here's another poster. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds again to look at it. Okay, so I really love this poster. What I love most about this poster is that it is so concise. I see the data that I should see, I know the introduction, and I also see the conclusion. Another thing is that within the figure captions, it kind of detailed what the methods or the experimental design were. So you want to be succinct as possible. You want to make sure you include your main findings. You want it to be visually or aesthetically pleasing. And you also want to make sure that if you step away, somebody can look at it and understand what's going on. So I showed you a good poster, and then I showed you a great poster. And what I just want to emphasize is that poster presentations are very flexible. They are not rigid because there's no type of conformity for them. You're going to have one slide that is going to depict all of the data or multiple data points and information. You might go through your poster in a linear format, but you might not. In addition, you're going to repeat your poster presentation quite a few times. Now, in the poster, you're going to tell a story, and you're going to do this orally as well as visually, but I want you to consider the following. Your first impressions in life, they matter, and with your poster, it's no different. You got to pique the interest of your audience, and to do so, you want to give them a short synopsis of the research that you prepared, which contains responses to the shown questions on this screen. This is also called your elevator pitch. So at your poster, the people aren't just looking at it, but you're also speaking and you're providing this elevator pitch. Your aim is to get your audience hooked and wanting further details. So keep in mind to keep the big picture abreast, as the audience will typically first need to understand the background information to get excited about the details of your work. Make sure your pitch is punchy and intriguing and relevant. So again, remember I did my research on environmental exposures and diabetes, and how such exposures during pregnancy contributes to poor health outcomes. So I would always start off my poster presentation. I'm going to talk with you all today for about 5 minutes. And within this 5 minutes, over 36 people within our state, I'm in Kentucky, by the way, will be diagnosed with diabetes. And of those 36, I would give the mortality rate, and then I would give it to I would then extrapolate that and say, okay, at a nationwide level, this is what's going on. So my punch was to say, hey, I want you to pay attention to diabetes. It's really a big issue, not only within the state that I'm in, but also nationwide. And then I began to provide more information. Okie dokie. Now, before I close this talk and open up the floor for questions, I just have to say a few words about questions. So questions are a part of the landscape, and you're going to get better at answering them as you continue to present. It's very hard to anticipate the questions that people are going to ask you. I literally have no idea what you all are going to ask me, but what I will assume and what I want you all to assume is that the audience is going to ask you questions within good faith. They're not out here to get you. And although sometimes they may just want to make a point, they're really trying to just learn more about your information that you presented because they are so interested. Now, I want to let you know it's okay if you get a question that you don't understand. Just ask the person to repeat the question, or another method of practice would be to repeat the question back to them. And if you don't know, it's completely okay. No one knows everything. We're scientists, so we're in the field of discovering things. You can say you don't know. You could also say, well, I may not fully understand or I don't know, but this is what I do know. And then based upon what I do know, this is what I speculate. Melissa's going to talk about this slide, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. Thank you all so much.
Great, thanks, Brittany. As we give folks a chance to put some questions in the Q&A box, I will just mention that our Resource Center is really excited to host the inaugural SURE Research Supported Conference in July, this coming summer, at the NIH campus. So if we have anyone in attendance today who is working in a lab that's funded by a SURE R16 grant, we would certainly encourage you to consider joining us this summer at the conference and maybe give you a chance to utilize some of the presentation skills and tips that Dr. Rice just spoke about. So I've dropped a few details about the conference on the screen here, but we have much more information on our conference website, which is linked at the bottom there. So certainly feel free to send us any questions if you are in an R16 funded lab, especially about the potential for travel awards for those who might be willing to give an oral presentation.
I just want to thank you all again. If you want any further information, please look up the SURE Resource Center. We will have more trainee-led talks or focused talks, excuse me. I'm just looking forward to interacting with you all further. And again, if you have questions, please ask. I don't know what to anticipate, but to the best of my ability, I will respond, or one of the Resource Center's directors or an administrator will respond. Thank you again.
So Brittany, we'll give it a minute and see if any questions populate in the Q&A box. If someone would like to request permission to ask a question using their microphone, you can use the hand raise tool to do that as well. Okay, we have a question. So this one says, do you have suggestions for a last slide of a presentation? For example, some sort of thank you slide or something else?
Oh, what I typically do, so I used to look at developmental or fetal programming, specifically with toxicant exposure, but I would always have like some cool kind of photo. Like one would be like a puzzle piece because exposures during early life are like that key window of opportunity to affect our long-term health. So it would have like fetal life and then the outside like rest of life. Sometimes I would have like a science comic that was related to whatever I was presenting upon. So your last slide could be anything. Think as much outside of the box or as inside of the box as you would like to. And thank you for that question.
So I have a question. I'm not sure if you had this in here, but what do you think is the best place for acknowledgements? Because I see it done both ways, where sometimes people do them at the beginning, sometimes people have them at the end, and sometimes people do a lot of along the way when they're saying that, this experiment was done by another student in the lab, Bob, who did, thanks for the data or whatever. What do you think works best?
So I can tell you all what works for me, and I want to say that I'm a product of my training. So I got my PhD under the tutelage of Dr. Kevin Pearson. So a lot of the times my presentation and even my writing style was more so tailored toward his preferences because I'm under his supervision as well as I'm learning from him. So I would do my acknowledgments all throughout. But prior to working with Dr. Pearson, I worked with someone else, and she would want me to do the acknowledgments at the end. So I would say really consult with your PI when you're generating your talk. Give it your best effort or attempt, and then your PI will let you know like what they want or what they don't want and why. And thank you for that question.
Okay, we've got some more questions. The next one says, it's my first time making a poster. My abstract was already accepted. Any advice on how to approach preparing the poster? And this person notes it's for a pretty important or sort of a significant conference.
Okay, first and foremost, congratulations, because getting your abstract accepted is a huge deal. Secondly, giving a poster presentation is amazing. If this is your first conference, which I can't really remember whether I heard that or not, this is huge. That's the right type of presentation to start off with because it's a little less formal and you get to practice your presentations multiple times. Now, in preparing that, I always start, and I'm going to give you my best practices. So, what works for me may not work for you. You're going to kind of get your feel as you continue to develop into the scientist that you're becoming. But I always start off with the script. So I figure out what I want to say. And remember, for poster presentations, you have to have an elevator pitch because it's not necessarily expansive. You're just going to kind of give people the meat and the bones. And then you're going to come back after you do that, allow them to ask you questions. And with whatever information you give them, you'll provide like the sides, maybe like a nice glass of sparkling cider and things of that sort. So craft your elevator pitch first, or at least that's what I would do. You want to be able to talk about your topic, so what's important, why people should care about it, what was your objectives, if you had any hypotheses, then you want to go into your data. You want to write on your elevator pitch about your data. What are you showing? What does it mean? Why is it important? And you're going to literally discuss that. And then towards the end, in your elevator pitch, you're going to talk about its significance, and potentially future directions, which you should have some. And yeah, so I said a whole lot, but what I want to reiterate is craft an elevator pitch first, or at least that's what I would do. You want to aim for about 5 to 7 minutes where you're giving a brief overview of everything that is on your poster. And again, congratulations on your abstract acceptance, and thank you again for the question.
Okay, the next question says, I know it was given as an example to start your oral presentation with statistical data, but can you use a fact instead of statistical data to start?
Oh my goodness, yes. Whatever you think is going to have the audience to bite in, use it. Yes. Yes to facts, yes to statistics, yes to stories, anything that you can use to actually captivate your audience, because remember, you're telling a story. Your research is a story. You want to hook the people. You want to give them supporting information to lead up to what your data is, why it's important. So in any way you feel like you can do it best, just hook the audience and make sure it's relevant. And thank you for that question.
A personal anecdote works well too in some cases too. So that's worked for me, especially if you're giving if you have a lay audience, if it's a lay audience, so it's not your people who have a lot of diverse background and not like a hardcore sciencey audience.
I agree.
Brittany, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So great job. So when you're at a poster session, you know, you're standing at your poster and people are coming to see your poster. But what about the times when you can go around and look at other posters? What are some of the things that you do when you are at a meeting and you're looking at other people's posters? What is it that draws you to a poster, or is it the title? Is it something about the way it looks, or how do you, you know, communicate on the other side?
That's a really good question. Thank you for that. So for me, I love poster. I mean, I like all presentations, but I love poster presentations because they allow me like more one-on-one time or FaceTime with whoever's presenting. I always, before I go to conferences, I look within like maybe you call it like an outline, a call. I'm not really sure the specific name, but it's going to tell you the names of the presenters, the number of the posters, and then what the title is. At conferences, my main goal is to learn more about my specific area. So I typically will go to more field specific conferences, but in the case where I go to generalized conferences, I'm like, okay, what is this person doing? How does this pertain to my work? And then I directly go to their posters. But I don't always just go to the posters that I look at in the list of postings or posters, but I also sometimes just walk by. And if I see something that's visually appealing, you all, and that the presenter has like a really great body language, I most of the time want to hear their work. So that leads me to learning like more things that I had no idea about. Somehow all science is connected, even if it doesn't seem like it's connected. And so I always can extrapolate and learn things. But for me, to say it succinctly, I would look within like the book of the abstracts, posters, listings, whatever it's titled. Sorry, I don't know that at the moment. Figure out what's most aligned to what I'm doing so that I can learn. And then I just go and I talk to the people. Thank you again for that question.
Can I add something to that too?
Yes.
I mean, I'll see when I look for posters to stop at, one of the things that I do is I look for ones where I'll agree with you that I do stop for ones that are way outside my area that look like they're interesting looking. So they're visually appealing and it looks like the person is eager to talk about it. I'll also look for, as a senior person, I'll look for student posters, especially if it looks like the student doesn't have anyone talking to them, because to me, it's helpful to get them engaged. I mean, so it is good to look for people that look like they're free. If it's crowded, it means it's an interesting poster, which is great, but you may not have an opportunity to ask any questions because there's just too many people there. So one of the things you have to keep in mind is, you know, how much time do you have and things like that.
Just want to bring up, I'm not sure if we have any questions, so I'm not going to belabor this, but I just want to bring up two things. When you're giving your poster presentation, you all, please don't stand in the middle of the posters. As Dr. Murphy stated, as I stated, sometimes people just walk by. So allow them to be able to see as much as your poster as they can. When you're presenting, kind of step off to the left or to the right of the posters, talk and point. The other thing I want to say is that I'm not sure if it's like really conveyed or not, but I've been extremely nervous about this. And I talk quite a bit and I am extroverted. So I've been trying to not move my hands as much. But I just want to let you know that when you're giving your presentations, it doesn't matter what stage you're at, there are going to be a level of nerve. So if you do feel nervous, just try to talk and work through it. If you play back this recording, you will see there were a few times I stumbled. I had to look up and say, okay, what was I saying? But that's okay. Just present and do your best. Your nerves, they're going to be there or not. For me, they're there. Just move them out the way and just try to plug forward. So I just wanted to say that because I didn't mention that.
Well, we'll give it just a few more seconds and see if we have any last questions that pop up. And while we wait for that, I'll just mention again that today's webinar is being recorded. So if you'd like to go back and watch, certainly give us a couple of days to process the video, but we will send you a link to view that recording to whatever email you use to register for today's session. All right, well, I don't see any new questions, so I will extend a big thank you to Brittany on behalf of our team, and thank you to all the guests who joined us today. We look forward to hopefully connecting with you again in the future.
Thank you all, and I hope to see you at more training-focused seminars.
Thank you, Brittany.